My parents disowned me for being left-handed. Now they demand I pay for my sister's college. The night my parents kicked me out, I was doing homework at the kitchen table. That's it. That's all I was doing. I was 16. I had a geometry test the next day, and I was working through proofs while my mother made dinner, and my father read the newspaper like it was still 1985. My younger sister Vanessa was sitting across from me, pretending to study but actually just watching me with that look she always had. The one that made her eyes go narrow and her mouth curl up at the corners like she was waiting for something entertaining to happen. I should have known something was wrong when the house went quiet. My mother stopped stirring whatever was in the pot. My father's newspaper lowered inch by inch until I could see his face, and his jaw was so tight I could see the muscle twitching near his ear. They were both staring at my hand, my left hand, the one holding the pencil. See, I'm left-handed. I've been left-handed since I could hold a crayon. And in my family, that was basically the same as being born with horns and a tail. My parents had this belief that left-handedness was wrong. Not just inconvenient or unusual, but actually morally wrong. Like being left-handed meant there was something broken inside you that could never be fixed. They'd spent my entire childhood trying to cure me. When I was 5, my mother would take the crayon out of my left hand and shove it into my right, over and over, until I was crying so hard I couldn't see the coloring book anymore. When I was 8, my father made me write lines with my right hand every night for a month. I will use my proper hand. I will use my proper hand. 500 times. My handwriting looked like a seismograph reading and my wrist ached for weeks, but I still couldn't do it. My brain just wasn't wired that way. But the worst was when I was 12. I'd been doing homework that night too. Math, I think. And I was writing with my left hand because my parents weren't home and I was tired of pretending. I didn't hear my mother come in behind me. Didn't know she was there until she grabbed my left wrist and yanked me out of my chair so hard my shoulder popped. "I told you," she said, and her voice was shaking but not with anger. With something else. Something that looked like fear but felt like hatred. "I told you what would happen if you kept using this hand." She dragged me to the kitchen. She turned on the stove. And she held my forearm over the burner until I was screaming so loud the neighbors almost called the police. The scar is still there. A patch of mottled, shiny skin on my inner forearm that's never quite matched the rest of me. When people ask about it, I tell them it was a cooking accident, which I guess isn't technically a lie. After that, I learned to write with my right hand in front of them. I learned to eat with my right hand, to wave with my right hand, to do everything with my right hand while they were watching. But when I was alone, I was still me. Still left-handed. Still the daughter they couldn't fix no matter how hard they tried. Vanessa knew, of course. She always knew. And she used it like a weapon. She was 2 years younger than me, blonde where I was brunette, right-handed where I was wrong. She was everything my parents wanted, and she knew it from the moment she was old enough to understand that I was the family disappointment. She'd catch me writing with my left hand and threaten to tell. She'd accidentally knock things into my left hand at dinner so my parents would see me catch them wrong. She told me once, when we were alone, that she wished I'd never been born because then she wouldn't have to share a room with someone cursed. That was the word they used. Cursed. Like left-handedness was a disease I'd caught or a punishment from God for something I did in a past life. My mother said it came from her grandmother, who was also left-handed and who died young and alone. "It's a sign," she'd tell me, shaking her head like I was already doomed. "It's a sign that something's wrong with your soul." So when my father looked at me across that kitchen table on the night I turned 16 and saw me writing with my left hand, saw that all their years of training and punishment and that horrible night by the stove hadn't fixed me, something in his face just shut down. "You're still doing it," he said. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, pencil frozen mid-equation, watching his face go from tight to slack to something I'd never seen before. It was like he was looking at a stranger. Like he'd finally given up on the idea that I was ever going to be the daughter he wanted. "David," my mother said from the stove, her voice thin and warning. But my father was already standing up, already folding his newspaper and setting it on the table with this terrifying calm, like he was about to do something he'd been thinking about for a very long time. "Get a bag," he said to my mother. "One bag. She can take her clothes." I remember the way my pencil fell out of my hand. I remember the way it rolled across my geometry homework and dropped off the edge of the table. I remember thinking this can't be happening even as my mother walked past me toward the hallway closet, even as Vanessa's face split into this huge grin like Christmas had come early. "Dad," I said, and my voice came out all wrong, high and shaky and young in a way I hated. "Dad, I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I'll use my right hand, I promise, I'll never—" "It's too late." He wasn't even looking at me anymore. He was looking at the table, at my homework, at the pencil marks I'd made with my wrong hand. We've tried everything. We've given you 16 years, and you're still. He shook his head. We can't have this in our home anymore. It's not right. It's not natural. My mother came back with a garbage bag. Black plastic, the kind we used for yard waste. She held it out to me without meeting my eyes. You have 10 minutes, she said. Take what you can carry. I looked at Vanessa. I don't know why. Maybe I thought she'd say something, do something, show some tiny sign that she understood this was insane. But she was just sitting there with her chin propped on her hand, watching me like I was a TV show she was really enjoying. Bye, freak, she said, and she wiggled her fingers at me in this little wave that made me want to throw up. I don't remember packing the bag. I don't remember choosing what to take. I just remember standing on the front porch in my socks because I'd forgotten my shoes, holding a garbage bag full of whatever I'd managed to grab, watching my father close the door in my face. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say anything. He just closed the door and turned off the porch light and left me standing there in the dark. I walked 3 miles to my Aunt Rachel's house. She was my mother's sister, the black sheep of the family because she'd moved away and married a man my grandparents didn't approve of, and generally refused to go along with any of the family's nonsense. I'd only met her a handful of times at holidays, but she'd always been kind to me. Always slipped me extra dessert and told me I was perfect exactly the way I was. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, barefoot and shaking and clutching a garbage bag, she didn't ask any questions. She just pulled me inside and wrapped me in a blanket and let me cry until I couldn't breathe. It's the hand thing, isn't it? She said finally, not a question. And when I nodded, she closed her eyes and said, I should have gotten you out of there years ago. She and her husband Cal took me in that night. They enrolled me in a new school. They paid for therapy and college and everything else my parents should have given me. They became my real family, the ones who taught me what it meant to be loved without conditions. I never spoke to my parents again, not once in 19 years. But I kept loose tabs. I set up a few Google alerts. I checked Vanessa's social media maybe once or twice a year, just to remind myself that I'd made the right choice by never looking back. I knew when my father retired. I knew when they moved to a smaller place. I knew Vanessa had dropped out of college after her sophomore year, though I never found out why. I hadn't seen these people in 19 years, and suddenly they're on my doorstep like nothing happened. I let them in. Not because I wanted to hear their apology, because I wanted to know what they were really after. They thought I'd forgotten. They thought I'd softened. They had no idea who I'd become. Let me tell you what they had the audacity to ask me. My mother was crying before she even sat down. Not real tears, I don't think, but that performative wetness she used to do whenever she wanted sympathy. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue she'd pulled from her purse and looked around my living room like she was appraising it for resale value. This is beautiful, Nora, she said, using the name I hadn't heard in 19 years. You've done so well for yourself. We always knew you would. I stayed standing by the door. I didn't offer them anything to drink. I didn't tell them to make themselves comfortable. Why are you here? I said. My father was doing that thing he used to do when I was a kid, where he'd look at everything in the room except the person he was supposed to be talking to. His eyes went to my bookshelf, my fireplace, the framed photos on my mantel. We've been thinking a lot about family lately, my mother started. About how we let things fall apart. About how we could have handled things differently. And we realized we don't want to die without making things right with you. We're not dying, my father added quickly, like that was supposed to be reassuring. We're healthy. We just mean, we're getting older. We don't have forever. I waited. I knew there was more coming. The build-up to the ask. The buttering up before the knife. Vanessa's doing well, my mother said, watching my face. She's engaged. To a wonderful man from a very good family. They're planning a spring wedding. Good for her, I said. I kept my voice flat, neutral, like we were discussing the weather. The thing is... My mother glanced at my father. He gave her a tiny nod. The thing is, she's been accepted to this very prestigious business school. Very exclusive, very expensive, very difficult to get into. Okay. Well, that's where she needs to go, her fiancé's family. They have certain expectations, about education, about accomplishments. And Vanessa needs this degree to really cement her place with them. You understand? I understood perfectly. Vanessa had found herself a rich fiancé with a snooty family, and now she needed fancy credentials to prove she was good enough for them. What does any of this have to do with me? I said. My parents exchanged another look. My mother's crying had stopped. Her eyes were dry now, calculating. Times have been difficult, my father said slowly. The economy. Retirement. We've had some setbacks. We're not in a position to help Vanessa with her tuition. And we thought, my mother jumped in, leaning forward like she was about to deliver exciting news. Since you've done so well for yourself, since you clearly have the resources, we thought maybe you'd want to help your sister. As a family gesture. To show that you've forgiven us and you're ready to move forward together. There it was. The ask. 19 years of silence, and they show up at my door wanting money for the daughter they chose to keep. No, I said. My mother blinked rapidly, like I'd just spoken a foreign language. I'm sorry? No, I won't pay for Vanessa's college. Was there anything else? Now wait just a minute, my father said, sitting up straighter. You haven't even thought about it. This is family we're talking about. Your own sister. My sister watched me get burned and did nothing. My sister spent years making my life miserable and was thrilled when you threw me out. She's not my family. She never was. That's not fair, my mother said, her voice going sharp. You were children. Children are cruel sometimes. You can't hold that against her forever. I can, actually. Watch me. My father's face was reddening now, that old familiar flush I remembered from my childhood. The one that meant I'd pushed too far, said too much, existed too loudly. You've always been selfish, he said. Even as a child. Always thinking about yourself. Never about the family. We spent 16 years trying to help you and you never appreciated any of it. Help me? I laughed and it came out harsh. You burned me. You threw me out on the street. That's not help. We did what we had to do, my mother said. We couldn't have that. That influence in our home anymore. Not with Vanessa there. We had to think about her future. And how's her future looking now? I asked. Dropped out of college, begging her estranged sister for money. Sounds like you did a great job protecting her. She didn't drop out, my father snapped. She lost her scholarship. There's a difference. Something in the way he said it made me pause. The defensiveness. The way his eyes slid away from mine right after. Lost it how? I asked. Silence. My mother's hands twisted in her lap. My father's jaw worked like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. It doesn't matter how, my mother said finally. The point is she needs help now, and you're in a position to give it. Lost it how? I repeated. There was an incident, my father said. A misunderstanding. The school overreacted. What kind of incident? More silence. They were looking at each other now, having some kind of wordless conversation I wasn't part of. I watched their faces, the way my mother's eyebrows drew together, the way my father gave a tiny shake of his head. It was nothing, my mother said. A minor traffic violation. But the school had these ridiculous policies about student conduct, and they... Traffic violation, I said. You mean she got a DUI? The way they both went still told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't. My father started, then stopped. Swallowed. Started again. It was one mistake. One night of bad judgment. She was young. She didn't know any better. Was anyone hurt? The silence this time was different. Heavier. My mother's face had gone pale, and she was gripping her purse strap so hard her knuckles were white. Was anyone hurt? I said again. It was an accident, my mother whispered. She didn't mean to. She was barely over the limit and it was dark, and the girl just stepped out of nowhere. The girl just stepped out of nowhere. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What happened to the girl? She's fine, my father said quickly. Too quickly. She recovered. She's completely fine now. Recovered from what? Neither of them answered. They wouldn't look at me. Wouldn't look at each other. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked into the silence, counting off seconds that felt like hours. Tell me what happened, I said, and my voice had gone quiet now. Dangerously quiet. Tell me exactly what happened, or I'm calling the police right now and asking them to look up any accidents involving Vanessa in the last 5 years. My mother made a sound that was almost a sob. Her leg, she said. The girl's leg was injured. She needed surgery, but she's fine now. She's walking. She's completely... How many surgeries? Nora, please. How many? 3. My father's voice was barely audible. 3 surgeries. And there's some ongoing issues. But we took care of it. We handled it. Handled it how? We came to an arrangement with the family. He was looking at his shoes again, speaking to the floor. They agreed not to press charges. Vanessa agreed to take some classes, do some community service. Everyone agreed it was better to just move on. You paid them off, I said. You paid the family to keep quiet so Vanessa wouldn't have a record. We did what we had to do to protect our daughter. My mother's voice had steel in it now, defensive and hard. Any parent would have done the same. How much? She pressed her lips together. How much did it cost to make a felony disappear? 10,000, my father said, and he finally looked up at me. His eyes were wet, roomy with age and something else. The family didn't have a lawyer. They didn't know what they could have gotten. They just wanted enough to cover her medical bills. So we gave them $10,000 and they signed the papers, and that was it. I sat back in my chair. My mind was spinning, trying to process what they were telling me. $10,000. That's all it had cost to make Vanessa's crime disappear. That's all the family had asked for, because they were scared and overwhelmed and didn't know any better. And my parents had jumped at the deal, happy to pay a fraction of what the case could have been worth just to keep their precious daughter out of prison. And now they were broke anyway. Not because of the settlement, but because they'd spent the last 4 years funding Vanessa's lifestyle. Her apartment, her car, her vacations, all the things she needed to maintain the image of a successful young woman worthy of marrying into a wealthy family. So let me understand this, I said slowly. Vanessa nearly killed someone. You paid off the family for $10,000 because they didn't know any better, and now you're broke because you've been funding her entire life ever since, and you want me to pay for her college. It's not like that, my mother said. You're making it sound. That's exactly what it's like. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was steady. Vanessa should be in prison right now. She should have a felony record. Instead, she's engaged to some rich guy and trying to get into business school, and you want me to fund that. You want me to help the daughter you protected after she destroyed someone's life, when you threw me out for writing with my left hand. I walked to the front door. I opened it. Get out, I said. My father stood up slowly, like his bones ached. He looked at me as he passed, and I expected to see shame or guilt or something like regret. But all I saw was weariness, frustration, like I was being unreasonable and difficult. My mother stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same floral one she'd worn when I was a kid. You were always cruel, she said softly. Even as a child, cold and selfish and cruel. We tried so hard to love you, and you made it impossible. I'm glad we sent you away. You would have destroyed this family if you'd stayed. I smiled at her. It felt strange on my face. I didn't destroy this family. Vanessa did. The difference is you let her. She walked out without another word. I watched my father's old Buick pull out of my driveway, watched it turn down the street and disappear around the corner. I watched their car pull away and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. But it wasn't from sadness. It was from rage. Vanessa had nearly killed someone and walked away clean while I got thrown out for being left-handed. Her rich fiancé had no idea who he was marrying. But then my sister showed up at my door, and everything got so much worse. 3 weeks later, I was researching Vanessa's fiancé when my doorbell rang. I'd spent those weeks digging, finding out everything I could about Duncan, about his family, about their law firm, and their charitable foundations and their society connections. I'd learned that his father had been a federal prosecutor before going into private practice, that his mother came from old money and sat on the boards of half a dozen nonprofits, that they were the kind of family who vetted everyone who got close to them, who ran background checks on business partners and probably romantic interests too. Which meant either they hadn't checked on Vanessa, or Vanessa had somehow hidden everything. I was still trying to figure out how to approach Duncan when the doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. I sighed and pushed back from my desk. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole and felt my whole body go cold. Vanessa was standing on my porch. She looked different than she had in her Instagram photos. Thinner, more polished. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and tailored pants that probably cost more than my first car, and her blonde hair was blown out in perfect waves. She looked like she was about to walk into a country club luncheon, not show up unannounced at the house of the sister she hadn't seen since we were teenagers. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, my hand on the doorknob. I could pretend I wasn't home. I could call the police. I could do 100 things other than open this door and face the person who had made my childhood a living hell. But I'd spent 19 years running from my family, hiding, building walls, and I was tired of being afraid. I opened the door. "Nora," Vanessa said, and she smiled. The same smile she used to give me right before she told our parents I'd been using my left hand again. It's so good to see you. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, one hand on the door, the other on the frame, blocking the entrance. Her smile flickered. Can I come in? We should talk. We have nothing to talk about. Oh, I think we do. Her voice was still sweet, but there was something underneath it now. Something sharp. Mom and Dad told me about their visit. About how you refused to help. I thought maybe I could change your mind. You can't. See, that's the thing. She took a step closer and I could smell her perfume. Something expensive and sharp. I don't think you understand the situation you're in. I don't think you understand what's at stake here. I understand perfectly. You want money? I said no. End of conversation. It's not that simple. Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. Did Mom and Dad tell you about my fiancé? Duncan? His family is, well, they're everything. Old money. Old connections. The kind of people who can make things happen or make things disappear. Good for you. They're also the kind of people who care very much about reputation, about image, about making sure everyone who carries their name is appropriate. She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. Duncan doesn't know about you, by the way. As far as he knows, I'm an only child. I told him my parents tried for years to have more children but couldn't. He found it very tragic. I felt something twist in my chest. Not surprise exactly. I'd assumed she'd erased me from her history. But hearing her say it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like I was just an inconvenience she'd tidied away. Why are you telling me this? I said. Because I want you to understand what will happen if you don't help me. She leaned in closer, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. I've already talked to Duncan about the possibility of you showing up. I told him I have an estranged relative who's troubled, mentally unstable. Someone who was removed from our home as a teenager because she was violent and dangerous. I told him this person might try to contact him at some point, might try to tell him lies about me, and he should ignore anything she says. The world seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the doorframe harder. He was very understanding, Vanessa continued. He said every family has someone like that. A black sheep. A problem child. He promised he wouldn't engage with anyone who tried to spread lies about me. I stared at her. My mind was racing, trying to process what she was telling me. She'd gotten ahead of me. She'd already poisoned the well, already made sure that anything I said to Duncan would be dismissed as the ravings of a crazy person. You're lying, I said, but my voice came out weaker than I wanted. Am I? She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, and held it up so I could see the screen. A text conversation. Duncan's name at the top. Just talked to Dee about the family situation, Vanessa had written. He knows about my troubled relative now. He was so sweet about it. Said he'd never let anyone come between us. Duncan's reply. Of course not. Family stuff is complicated. I've got your back. Love you. Vanessa tucked her phone away, still smiling. So here's how this is going to work. You're going to pay for my tuition, $150,000 for 2 years. And in exchange, I'll disappear from your life forever. You'll never hear from me or Mom and Dad again. We'll all just pretend you don't exist, which, let's be honest, is what everyone wants anyway. And if I don't? Then I'll make your life very, very difficult. Her smile turned sharp. I've already warned Duncan. That was just the beginning. If you don't pay up, I'll find your employer, your neighbors, your friends. I'll tell everyone you know that you're violent and unstable and dangerous. And when you try to defend yourself, when you try to tell people the truth about our family, no one will believe you. Because I'll have already laid the groundwork. She reached out and patted my cheek, a gesture so condescending it made my skin crawl. Think about it, she said. I'll be in touch. She turned and walked down my front steps, got into a sleek white BMW, and drove away. I stood in the doorway for a long time after she left. My hands were shaking. My mind was spinning. She'd outmaneuvered me before I even knew we were playing a game. I went inside and sat on my couch and tried to think. Vanessa had already talked to Duncan. She'd painted me as mentally unstable, as dangerous, as someone whose words couldn't be trusted. If I reached out to him now, he'd probably dismiss me immediately. He'd probably tell Vanessa about it, and she'd use it as more ammunition against me. But I couldn't just do nothing. I couldn't let her win. I couldn't pay $150,000 to the sister who had tormented me my entire childhood, who had watched me get burned and laughed, who had waved at me while I stood on the porch with nothing but a garbage bag. And I couldn't let Duncan marry someone who had nearly killed a woman and covered it up. He deserved to know who she really was, even if he didn't want to hear it. Vanessa had warned him about me. She'd told him to ignore anything I said, but she couldn't have prepared him for actual evidence. She couldn't explain away court documents and settlement records and a scar on my arm that proved what my family was really like. I just had to find a way to make him look at them. I picked up my phone and called Aunt Rachel. "I need your help," I said when she answered. "I need to find records of a settlement. Something that was sealed, something my parents paid to make disappear." Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Tell me everything." So I did. The visit from my parents, what I'd learned about Vanessa's accident, the cover-up, the blackmail, all of it. When I finished, she let out a long breath. I always knew they'd come crawling back eventually. I just thought it would be when they needed a kidney, not tuition money. "Can you help me find the records?" "I know someone who might be able to dig them up. My friend Gloria works at the courthouse downtown. She knows how to navigate sealed files." Rachel paused. "It's not strictly legal, what I'm asking her to do. But if you're sure this is what you want." "I'm sure." "Then I'll call her today." Vanessa thought she'd already won. She thought she'd blocked every path I could take. But she forgot one thing. She warned him I was crazy. She never thought I'd have proof. I was going to email her fiancé directly and make him look at every document, every record, every piece of evidence that proved who she really was. Vanessa poisoned the well. I was about to show him what was really in the water. It took Gloria 3 days to find the records. She sent them to Rachel, who forwarded them to me with a note that said, "Be careful with these. And be sure." I was sure. The documents were damning. Vanessa had been nearly twice the legal limit when she hit a woman in a crosswalk outside campus. The victim had been 22 years old, a nursing student walking home from her shift at the hospital. The impact had shattered her leg in 4 places. She'd needed 3 surgeries. The settlement had been for $10,000, paid in a single lump sum. In exchange, the family had agreed not to press charges and not to speak publicly about the accident. $10,000. That's what my sister had paid to walk away from nearly killing someone, less than the cost of a used car. Now I had evidence. Real, verifiable evidence that Vanessa was not who she pretended to be. The question was how to get Duncan to look at it. I thought about what Vanessa had said. "He already thinks you're crazy. Anything you say will just prove me right." She was probably right. If I sent Duncan a message out of the blue, he might delete it without reading. If I showed up at his office, he might call security. She'd prepared him for exactly this scenario. But I had to try. Because the alternative was paying Vanessa off or letting her destroy my reputation, and I wasn't willing to do either. I found Duncan's email through his company's website. I spent 2 hours drafting a message, deleting it, starting over. Finally, I settled on something short and direct. "Duncan, my name is Nora. I'm Vanessa's older sister. I know she's told you about me, and I know what she's told you. I'm writing anyway because I have information you need to see before your wedding. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to look at the documents I've attached and verify them yourself. If they're fake, you'll know I'm exactly who Vanessa says I am. But if they're real, you deserve to know who you're actually marrying. Please, just look." I attached the court filings, the settlement agreement, Vanessa's blood alcohol level from the police report. Then I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. I didn't expect a response. I figured he'd see my name, remember what Vanessa had told him, and delete the email without opening it. But the next morning, my phone buzzed with a notification. Duncan had replied. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but Vanessa warned me you might try something like this. She told me you were removed from her family as a teenager because you were violent and unstable. She told me you might try to contact me with fabricated lies. I'm not going to engage with whatever delusions you're operating under. Do not contact me again." I read the email 3 times. Each time I felt something different. First, despair. He wasn't going to listen. Vanessa had won. Then, anger. He hadn't even looked at the documents. He'd dismissed me without bothering to check if what I was saying was true. Finally, determination. Because his email told me something important. He was defensive. He was angry. Which meant some part of him wasn't sure. Some part of him had looked at my message and felt a flicker of doubt. I just had to make that flicker into a flame. I wrote back. "I understand why you don't trust me. Vanessa told you exactly what to think about me before I ever had a chance to speak. That's what she does. She controls the narrative. She makes sure everyone sees exactly what she wants them to see. But I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust verifiable facts. The documents I sent you are real. Court filings, settlement records, police reports. They have case numbers. They have dates. They have signatures. You can verify every single one of them yourself. If I'm lying, if these documents are fabricated, then proving it should be easy. Call the courthouse. Request the records. Have your father's law firm look into it. Do whatever you need to do to prove that I'm the mentally unstable liar Vanessa says I am. But if you're afraid to check, if you'd rather not know, then ask yourself why. Ask yourself why Vanessa told you I was dangerous before I ever tried to contact you. Ask yourself why she made you promise to ignore anything I said. Ask yourself why she's so determined to make sure you never hear my side of the story. I'm not going to contact you again. You have the documents, you have the case numbers. What you do with them is up to you. I sent the email. Then I put my phone down and waited. The next 2 days were agony. I checked my email obsessively, looking for any sign that Duncan had responded. But there was nothing. No reply, no acknowledgement, just silence. I started to think I'd failed. That he'd deleted my second email just like I'd told him not to. That Vanessa had won after all. Then, on the third day, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line was empty. The body had only 5 words. Can we meet in person? I stared at the screen for a full minute before I could bring myself to respond. Yes. Name a time and place. We agreed to meet that afternoon at a coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory. Public enough that neither of us had to worry about the other one being dangerous. I got there 15 minutes early. I ordered a black coffee and sat at a table in the back corner where I could see the door. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. This was my one shot. If I couldn't convince him, I'd never get another chance. Duncan walked in at exactly 3 p.m. He looked different than I'd expected. The photos I'd seen online showed someone polished and confident, all expensive suits and easy smiles. The man walking toward me now looked tired. His suit was rumpled like he'd slept in it. His eyes had dark circles under them. His jaw was tight with tension. He spotted me and walked over slowly, like he was approaching something that might bite. Nora? He said. Duncan. I gestured to the chair across from me. Thank you for coming. He sat. He didn't order anything, just clasped his hands on the table and looked at me. His eyes were guarded, suspicious, searching for signs of the crazy person Vanessa had described. Before we start, he said, I want you to know that I almost didn't come. I almost deleted your emails and blocked your address and forgot you existed. That's what Vanessa told me to do. That's what made sense. So why didn't you? He was quiet for a moment. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. Because I checked the case numbers, he finally said. The ones in those documents you sent. I had someone at my father's firm pull the records, and they were real. Everything you sent me was real. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. But that doesn't mean I believe you, he continued, and his voice hardened. Documents can be obtained for all kinds of reasons. Maybe you're trying to blackmail Vanessa. Maybe you're trying to extort her, and this is your leverage. Just because the accident happened doesn't mean everything else you're saying is true. Fair enough, I said. What would convince you? He studied me for a long moment. Tell me about your childhood. Tell me why Vanessa says you were removed from the home. She says I was violent, unstable, dangerous. I kept my voice steady. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? I took a breath. This was the part I'd been dreading. The part where I had to rip open the oldest wound I had and show it to a stranger who might not even believe me. My parents have this belief, I said slowly. A superstition, I guess you'd call it. They think left-handedness is a curse, a sign that something's wrong with your soul. Duncan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't say anything. I'm left-handed, I continued. I've been left-handed since I could hold a crayon. And my parents spent my entire childhood trying to fix me, trying to make me write with my right hand, punishing me when I couldn't. Punishing you how? I hesitated. This was the moment, the point of no return. When I was 12, I said, my mother caught me writing with my left hand. She dragged me to the kitchen. She turned on the stove. And she held my arm over the burner until I passed out from the pain. Duncan's face went still. 4 years later, my father caught me writing with my left hand at the dinner table. He decided he'd had enough. He gave me a garbage bag, told me I had 10 minutes to pack, and threw me out of the house. I was 16 years old. Silence stretched between us. Duncan was staring at me, his expression unreadable. He shook his head. That's an incredible story, if it's true. It's true. But I only have your word for it. He leaned back in his chair, and something shifted in his face. The suspicion was back, harder than before. Look, I came here because the documents were real. But sitting here, listening to you, I don't know. This whole thing sounds like something out of a movie. Parents who throw their kid out for being left-handed? A mother who burns her own child? It's a lot to believe. I understand. And frankly, he continued, talking over me, the more I think about it, the more this feels like a setup. Vanessa warned me this might happen. She said you were manipulative. She said you'd have a whole sob story prepared, something designed to make me feel sorry for you. He uncrossed his arms and put his hands on the table like he was about to stand up. I think I've heard enough. My heart seized. He was leaving. He was actually leaving. After everything I'd done to get here, after all the evidence I'd gathered, he was going to walk out and marry Vanessa anyway. Wait, I said, and my voice came out sharper than I intended. Please, just wait. He paused, halfway out of his chair. His eyes were cold. Give me one reason. I thought about everything I'd been through. 19 years of silence, 19 years of carrying this alone. And now I was sitting across from the one person who could actually hold Vanessa accountable, and he was about to walk away because he thought I was lying. I pulled back my sleeve. This, I said, and I placed my forearm on the table between us. This is why you should wait. The scar was ugly in the harsh coffee shop lighting. Mottled and shiny, the skin puckered and discolored where it had healed wrong. It looked exactly like what it was, a burn that had been inflicted deliberately, held in place until the damage was done. Duncan froze. He was still half standing, one hand on the back of his chair, but his eyes were locked on my arm. That's not a story, I said quietly. That's not something I made up. That's what my mother did to me when I was 12 years old because I wrote with the wrong hand. He slowly sank back into his chair. His face had gone pale. Jesus, he whispered. I was doing homework, I said, writing with my left hand because I didn't know she'd come home early. She grabbed me and dragged me to the kitchen and held my arm over the burner until I passed out. I woke up on the kitchen floor with my arm wrapped in a dish towel. She told me if I ever used my left hand again, it would be worse. Duncan was still staring at the scar. His mouth was slightly open. His breathing had gone shallow. And Vanessa? Vanessa was standing in the doorway. I pulled my sleeve back down. She was 14 years old enough to call for help, old enough to try to stop it. But she didn't. She just watched me scream. And 4 years later, when my father finally threw me out, she waved at me from the window and said, "Bye, freak." Duncan was quiet for a long time. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were different. The suspicion was still there, but it was fighting with something else now. Something that looked like horror. Why didn't you tell me about the scar in your emails? Would you have believed me? Would you have agreed to meet me if I'd said, by the way, I have a burn scar from when my mother tortured me? I shook my head. You would have thought I was crazy. You would have deleted the email and never looked back. The only way to make you understand was to show you in person. He nodded slowly. I could see him processing, trying to fit this new information into the picture he had of his fiancée. She told me she was an only child, he said finally. She told me her parents tried for years to have more children but couldn't. She told me her childhood was happy, normal. She's good at that, at making people see what she wants them to see. Why would she lie about having a sister? Because she knew I might try to contact you someday. Because she knew there was a chance you'd find out about her past, and she wanted to make sure you wouldn't believe anything I said. I leaned forward slightly. Think about it, Duncan. She preemptively told you about a crazy, violent relative who might try to contact you with lies. She made you promise to ignore anything this person said. Why would she do that unless she was afraid of what I might tell you? His jaw tightened. I could see him running through conversations in his mind, looking for signs he'd missed. She said she was protecting me, he said, but it sounded more like a question than a statement. Protecting you from what? From the truth? From someone who wanted to hurt her. Have I tried to hurt her? I kept my voice calm, steady. I sent you documents. I asked you to verify them. I offered to meet you in person and tell you my side of the story. I showed you the scar that proves what my family is really like. Does that sound like someone who wants to cause harm? Or someone who wants you to know the truth? Duncan didn't answer. He was looking at the table, at his clasped hands, at anything except me. I'm not asking you to take my word for it, I said. You verified the documents yourself. You saw the scar with your own eyes. Vanessa hit a woman who was walking in a crosswalk. She shattered her leg in 4 places. She needed 3 surgeries. And instead of facing consequences, Vanessa's family paid $10,000 to make it all go away. 10,000, Duncan repeated. That's nothing. That's not even close to what a case like that would be worth. The family didn't have a lawyer. They didn't know what they could have gotten. They were scared and overwhelmed and just wanted enough to cover the medical bills. My parents jumped at the deal. I paused. That's who they are. That's who Vanessa is. People who take advantage of others when they're at their most vulnerable. Duncan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were wet. If this is true, he said slowly, if everything you're telling me is true, then the woman I'm engaged to is someone I don't know at all. I can't tell you what to do with that information. That's your choice, but I thought you deserved the chance to make an informed decision before you married into this family. Why? His voice cracked on the word. Why do you care what happens to me? We've never met. I'm a stranger to you. I thought about the question. About 19 years of anger and grief and the burning need to see justice done. Because Vanessa has never faced consequences, I said. Not for what she did to me. Not for what she did to that woman she hit. She spent her whole life hurting people and walking away clean, and everyone around her has enabled it. My parents, the family who took the settlement, everyone. I met his eyes. You're the first person in a position to actually hold her accountable. The first person who might be willing to say no, this isn't okay. I'm not going to pretend this is normal. I'm not asking you to do this for me. I'm asking you to do it because it's right. Because people like Vanessa only get away with things when everyone around them looks the other way. Duncan stared at me. His face was unreadable. Then he stood up. I need time, he said. I need to think about this. I need to. He shook his head. I don't know what I need. Take all the time you need. And if I decide you're lying? He met my eyes. If I decide this is all some elaborate scheme to hurt Vanessa, then you'll marry her and I'll never contact you again. I held his gaze. But you verified the documents yourself. You saw the scar. You know what's real and what isn't. The question is whether you're willing to act on it. He nodded slowly. Then he turned and walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. I sat there for a long time after he left. My coffee had gone cold. The afternoon light was fading. I didn't know if I'd succeeded or failed. I'd done everything I could. I'd given him the evidence. I'd told him the truth. I'd shown him the scar that proved my story wasn't a fabrication. The rest was up to him. The next week was the hardest of my life. I didn't hear from Duncan. I didn't hear from Vanessa either, which I took as a sign that he hadn't told her about our meeting. But I also didn't know what he was thinking, what he was deciding, whether he was going to believe me or convince himself that I was exactly the person Vanessa had described. I jumped every time my phone buzzed. I checked Vanessa's Instagram obsessively, looking for any sign that something had changed. But her posts kept coming, steady and cheerful and oblivious. Photos of wedding dress shopping, photos of cake tastings, photos of her and Duncan looking happy and in love. Maybe he didn't believe me, I thought. Maybe he looked at the evidence and decided it didn't matter. Maybe he loves her enough to forgive her. Maybe I did all of this for nothing. Days passed. Still nothing. And then, one morning, I got a notification. Vanessa had deleted her Instagram. I checked her Facebook. Gone. Her Twitter. Gone. Every trace of her social media presence wiped clean overnight. I searched for Duncan online. His profiles were still there, but every photo of Vanessa had been removed. Every mention of their relationship, deleted. His relationship status changed from engaged to nothing at all. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, trying to process what I was seeing. He'd believed me. He'd looked at the evidence, really looked at it, and he'd made his decision. 2 weeks after I met Duncan for coffee, the engagement was off, and my sister lost the image-obsessed family she had so desperately wanted.